Welcome back to a very special episode of FURYCAST. But first, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and of course, smash the bell for notifications. And don't forget to sign up to the mailing list for my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild. Sign up now. The link is in the description. That's right, a special episode. 2 cities, trapped in bitter conflict. A conflict, a rivalry, a war of baseball. That's right, my guest today hails from the beautiful city of Philadelphia. I'm from Houston, if you didn't know. We talk about his journey through the martial arts, receiving his BJJ black belt from Erik Paulson, and even developing his own self-defense system. Today on FURYCAST, I welcome Coach Alan Chambers. On FURYCAST, I like to get into the journey. How you went from a boy to a successful jiu-jitsu entrepreneur and coach and quite a skilled martial artist, if I could say so myself. You helped me out a lot with open guard and things. The short time we spent together at CSW's coaches camp. So I want to thank you for that. But also just go back, tell me like what your childhood was like. What was it like growing up, and where you're from as well?
Yeah, sure. So I currently reside in the Philadelphia area. I've been in the Philly area for about almost 25 years at this point. And growing up, I originally I'm from Staten Island, New York, which will kind of plug into some of the other things, ironically enough, home of the Shaolin. But Staten Island, New York, and then split my time between there and the Poconos. Pretty much grew up in the Poconos, which is, for those of you not from the area, which is northeastern Pennsylvania. But I would often go back and forth because my father still had business there. So growing up, I still went back and forth, but I spent majority of my time in Pennsylvania. And then at an early age, maybe around 7, 8, I started doing karate. And it was.
You hear how he pronounces it, everybody? Karate. That's when you're real. That's when you're a real deal karate man. Karate.
I think it was a Shotokan. I think it's still there, actually. I grew up in a very small town in PA, and it was a Shotokan derivative, I believe. So I did that for a bunch of years, and fortunately and unfortunately, as I went through middle school and then into high school, my training lessened more and more because I was getting into sports. Obviously, I was a teenager at that point, so other things were distracting me. And then I was playing more and more sports. I had 2 sports I was playing year round. So my martial arts training went lower and lower, but I was still very much fascinated with it. Started collecting some books at that point about Bruce Lee. I remember one of my first Bruce Lee books was The Way of the Warrior. So still very much top of mind for myself. And then when I went to college, I wasn't good enough to play those sports Division I. So what I started focusing on was and I was broke. So I started just focusing on continuing collecting books and DVDs at that time. YouTube wasn't even around yet. So it was me just collecting whatever I could get my hands on martial arts wise, every style, anything I could read, anything I could play with or look at. And as soon as I graduated college, I wound up finding the nearest gym and started training. And I've never stopped since. So I'd say for the majority of my life, I've trained in martial arts, if not multiple martial arts, like I am now.
So let's go back a little bit. So the Bruce Lee books, was it those like well, you named the book, but he had a series of books that would be like one solid color, like green, then like
Yep.
he's in black and white in the foreground, like Bruce Lee's fighting method. Was it those series of books that really helped you in the beginning?
It wasn't. It was about philosophy. I believe it's called The Way of the Warrior. It's actually over there. And normally I'd get up. I don't want to.
So it wasn't his fighting book, it was his philosophy book.
Yeah, it was a philosophy book. So it was a lot about fighting and Taoism and the different kind of philosophies he pulled from. Lots of people don't realize he was a philosophy major. So he pulled a lot of that into his martial arts training and his way of being and his look on life.
And so were you into, of course, look, I was that kid that was like, I grew up poor and super into martial arts. So it was like Black Belt Magazine, Inside Kung Fu. Sometimes I couldn't even pay for them. You just go to the corner store and just like read through them real quick. But when I could get 250 together, I would buy these, inside Taekwondo, Kung Fu, whatever. But black belt was probably the mainstay. Were you into those magazines as well?
I was, but very much looking at them in the store. The nearest mall to me growing up was a good 35 minutes, and we didn't frequent the mall that often, so I really didn't get a chance to look. So I'd always wind up going in. I think at the time it was Walden Books. I would go into Walden Books and I'd look at all the magazines, and then look at. I think if I remember correctly, they even had comic books at that time, which was another big influence. So it was between looking at some of the comic books and then also looking at the martial arts magazines as much as possible.
Now, comic books. I'm working on a comic book right now, on a graphic novel right now. Of course, I've made a movie. And I live a creative life. You kind of had that. We have that in common as well. You were super into martial arts, but you were also a creative kid. Is that correct?
Yeah. I pursued. I've always been fascinated by art, and I remember being a young kid, and then for some reason, I don't know why I was so attracted to this, but I was really fascinated by graffiti, the graffiti I would see in the city when we were back and forth. And I just fell in love with anything comics, anything animated series. Obviously, Ninja Turtles was super popular at that point in the late 80s, early 90s, X-Men, all those things that you would see. A lot of Marvel and DC, obviously, comic books. But I think that early influence that I had from seeing all that fueled a fire for not only the art and the stuff I loved, but also martial arts in addition to that. And I remember watching a lot of sports growing up as a kid and being obsessed with the graphics on the screen, and then also the logos of the teams. So I would just crazy draw all the logos from every major sports team possible, in college team too. And then eventually that led me going to art school. And then now I have, for the past almost 20 years, I've had a career in graphic design or web design. For layman's terms, it's really user experience is what my focus is. And different avenues within that space. So I've been a graphic designer and artist for many years. So I like just saying artist because I do both the martial and the design focus, if you want to call it that, which is really part of Bushido and part of everything else if you really nerd out and dive into that.
Now, I want to ask you two questions. I don't want to lose my train of thought. The first question is, were you that kid that drew on the desktop in middle school? Like you draw the logo for the NFL team on the desktop?
No, I didn't do desktop. I used to have notebooks. It's funny enough, a couple of years ago, I found some of the notebooks, and it was just like every NFL team logo, every basketball team logo, and just obsessed with that stuff. And I would just draw college teams, especially. I remember waking up early in the morning, watching a bunch of cartoons, and then sports would be on, especially college football. And I would just, every team that came on, I would draw their logo. And so that was my thing. I unfortunately didn't draw on any desk, or fortunately, I should say.
I was a desk drawing kid. I'd come back the next day, somebody erased what I drew. But also the concept of just being an artist is something I've been dealing with my entire life. In other words, looking at martial arts and what some might call graphic art or whatever you do, look, poetry. I've done hip hop for years, so I've done music, I've done martial arts, I've made a movie, I'm making a comic book, but to me it's all art, and I feel that people look at the martial arts like it's fighting, and then there's arts, and then there's martial arts, which is combat. How do you feel about that, and what's the how do art and martial arts intersect?
They're expressions, in my opinion, to put it simply. They're expressions, and oftentimes people think of martial arts as just purely martial. And I think the Japanese have done an amazing way of kind of codifying a lot of things. Not that it didn't exist prior to them in Chinese and Indian culture and many of the other cultures that have had martial arts, but the Japanese have been really, really strict with codifying everything, documenting everything. And you see that in like samurai code. They had to partake in ikebana, which is flower arrangement. They had to learn music. They had to learn calligraphy, poetry writing, all these different things that would balance you, because fighting was a big part of what you had to do to train, but fighting in itself was a tiny sliver of being a well-rounded individual. And I really looked at it that way. not early on because I didn't understand that or was really exposed to that early on. But as I got older, I started to see that this was a full path. It was a way of making yourself well-rounded, that you could have the self-preservation aspects, protecting yourself, protecting others, helping others be self-sustainable, but at the same time having an outlet, a creative outlet to express yourself. And that's really in martial arts, especially arts like grappling arts. It's not only grappling arts, but in particular grappling arts. There's so much creativity that you can have within them and self-expression. I absolutely love it. So for me, it's one and the same. And martial arts is what I love about martial arts is everything aside from punching, kicking, stabbing, choking, locking, all that other stuff. So it's like the cultural influences, the regional influence, the food, the sometimes caste systems, the religious aspects, all those other things that people don't talk about at all, healing, right? All those things that no one ever mentions for the most part, for me are way more fascinating than any of the actual martial punching, kicking, stabbing stuff. I'm way more fascinated by that than anything.
Sound like somebody that's done kung fu.
Yes, I have.
I can always spot them out. But so let's get back on your journey a little bit. So now you're in college.
Yep.
Did you pursue the martial arts in college?
I did. I was broke. I had 2 or 3 jobs simultaneously whenever I could pick up part-time work and studying. But what I did was, as I mentioned, try and buy as many DVDs as I could, download through, I think at the time it was maybe LimeWire, Kazaa, one of those, illegally promoting downloads.
Was it like Marco Huas, King of the Streets,
King of the Streets,
that stuff? Yeah,
yeah, Gene LaBelle, Walt Bayless, you name it. Like these people, lots of people
Bart
never.
Vale, yeah,
Yep. All these people, yeah, shoot fighting from Mark for Vale, yeah, everything I could get my hands on, boxing, anything from the old JKD tapes, Paul Vunak stuff, judo and jiu-jitsu stuff, Systema stuff was probably a little bit later, but still Systema stuff, you name it. I downloaded it and I watched it. I was just obsessed about it until I graduated, and then I had saved up enough money and I had a regularly paying job that was a full-time job where first thing I did was enroll and start training martial arts, multiple actually at that point.
So now take me through that journey. What kind of school was it? Well, how old were you first, and what kind of school was it, and where were you at?
So it was right upon graduating. So I was 20 or 21, and I had moved out of my apartment that was just off campus into the suburbs to start a new job. And the first gym that I could find closest to myself did boxing. They did some kickboxing, but particularly they were known for grappling. And at that time, the guy was promoting it as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was like no-gi grappling for the most part. I later found out that was actually pancration. So the guy was a little bit shady with that. But it got me my start, and I absolutely loved it. And then a couple months later, I wound up moving into Philly proper and changing jobs. And what I did was join a Thai boxing gym. So the Thai boxing gym was there, and then they started a BJJ program as well with the formal kimono. So I was doing both of those at the same time. And then after a couple months, I kept pursuing that. A couple months, I really wanted to do some of the other stuff that I had been studying previously. So weapon stuff, I was trying to find some JKD, some Kali. And
now, when you say weapons in the martial arts community, that could mean a lot of things. That could be from bow and sai, but I get the feeling you're talking about like Kali, knife, machete, kind of. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, I had exposure to some of those more traditional like bow, jo, sai, nunchucks as a kid, and that really wasn't. No one really spent time using kind of everyday weapons, if you will. So anything from, and this kind of led me to pursuing all weapons in general, including projectile, which I call firearms, but edge weapons in particular, knives, mostly those things that you would find in Southeast Asian arts like Filipino Kali. And I went around trying to find as many people as I could to teach me knife stuff and weapon stuff. A lot of it was Japanese in origin. Difficult to find some Filipino martial arts at that time in the Philadelphia area. It really wasn't prevalent. But when I came across it, I was super excited and then dove headfirst into it.
So how long were you at that school?
So that wound up being, we became good friends. I was friends with that instructor. I'm still good friends with that. He's one of my best friends, if not my best friend. And we opened up a school together. Fast forward many years later, which was Philly Self-Defense, based in Fishtown, Philly. We were open for 9 years, almost 10 years. And then
Fishtown's rough, isn't it? That's like the hood, isn't it?
It always had a rough reputation, but
everything I know about Philadelphia comes from, or the East Coast comes from comic books. There was a comic called Fishtown.
Yeah, it was very much an old school Irish Polish neighborhood. And then it slowly started becoming gentrified maybe 20 years ago. I lived there for 10 years when I had my gym. And then probably a handful of years ago, I moved out of that neighborhood.
Now, was it like the Fisherman's District? Is that the historical?
Yeah, so it's right in the river, and it's really historic for two things. There's a particular type of fish that would be caught there called shad in Fishtown, which is old school. I don't think they're very prevalent anymore. And then number two, supposedly it's where the Treaty of Shakamaxon took place, which was basically William Penn signed an agreement with the Shakamaxon Indians at the time for the treaty of Shakamaxon. Took place in Fishtown right there. So it was very much an industrial Irish-Polish area. Hard working, blue collar, everything revolved around water for the most part, or manufacturing.
It's interesting to get a little of the history. So you opened the gym with your buddy. How'd that go?
Great. I mean, we started off, it was a dream of mine to always want to, well, I'll actually back up a little bit. In my pursuit to start training all these different things, within a year of graduating college, I was already doing 5-6 different arts, as much as I could. Every day I would do a different art if I could, sometimes twice a day. I would do a private, sometimes back to back, or I do something early in the morning and then something in the afternoon.
You could afford this at this time?
Well, I had a regular paying job at that point, so I was super excited. And privates really weren't that expensive. Obviously, as time has gone on, and particularly with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, prices have gone up considerably since then. But yeah, I mean, I was doing as much as I could, and that was in place of like my gym membership to, whatever gym met for $50 a month or whatever. I'd save up all my money and just train as much as possible. And I started realizing that all these different things I was doing, for the most part, very few of them had like a logical base for self-defense, and self-defense for, not for martial artists, but like everyday people. And one of the reasons I got into martial arts was because I was bullied when I was real young, and it affected me. I mean, I survived it. I didn't have nearly as bad of a case as some kids do now, or even some of my friends had. But it did affect me, and I wanted to pursue that. And after starting to train a lot of these different arts, I said, how come there's no self-defense gyms? I don't understand this, right? Every gym, every martial arts, you go to Taekwondo, they say self-defense. I go to BJJ, they say self-defense. But how much of it is really street applicable self-defense for non-martial artists, right? That's because that's who needs self-defense. I couldn't find any. So that really bugged me. And I said, hey, let me start teaching what I know and putting together a logical system for people to survive, for self-preservation. So I started Philly Self-Defense, and was teaching free seminars all over Philly, the Philadelphia area. Anyone who would come, was open to anyone. You could donate if you wanted to, but I'm more than happy to do it for free and just spend time. So on weekends, I would do free seminars all over the city. And then eventually that led me to opening a gym with my friend who I mentioned, Joe. It was his dream and my dream to always open up a gym, but we would never be able to do that individually. It was just too much money. We both had careers. He had a family. It was too difficult. So together, we kind of combined our efforts and opened up a school, and really successful for 9 years. It was very much focused on self-defense. We had a great culture there. We loved doing it. But unfortunately, due to COVID, a few months into COVID, we decided to close. It was just too rough to have to handle that, our everyday job, and then trying to transition to just online resources. And we'd be doing it purely out of pride. So we decided to close it. And as much as I miss it, I've been really fortunate to have the opportunity to start expanding my teaching and my own training over the last 2+ years to be able to travel even more than what I was previously and start to influence more people even outside of just this area.
Now, at what point in this process had you come across CSW?
So early on, I remember seeing fights in Japan this was, I guess, the early 2000s. And I remember watching fights in Japan from some old DVDs. YouTube, I think, came about just about mid 2000s, early 2000s, around then. And I remember watching some Japanese fights. And I can't remember what I had on DVD somewhere, or it was downloaded. I think they were old Shooter fights. And I remember looking it up, like, what is Shooter, what is catch wrestling, looking all these things up. I had old catch wrestling books. And I remember seeing CSW and Erik Paulson. And I remember seeing some of those old, like, Vale conditioning DVDs and some of the old ones that were specific to certain submissions. For example, he has a whole chicken wings, which is for those of you who aren't familiar with catch wrestling, it's basically the bent arm lock, the Udigarame or Kimura, or catch double top wrist lock. So he had a bunch of those videos, and I remember watching it and trying to find and pursue him wherever he was. And that was me going to a seminar and chatting with him, and then I built up a relationship with him. And I remember the first time I met him, we were talking, and he said, "Hey, come over here, come hang out. I want to talk to you some more." And I was like, "Sure." And someone handed him a few beers, and he handed me a beer, and then we sat there and talked for like 2 hours. And then I said, "Coach, what do I have to do to join?" He was just keep coming and send me an email next week. And I was like, "Okay, I'm in." And then that was—
What year was this?
This is a tough one because I was in that CSW podcast a few months ago, and I couldn't remember. It had to be early 2000s, and I don't remember exactly when, and it drives me nuts. But I think it was early 2000s at some point.
Okay, so you're a CSW OG.
Yeah, not as long as some others. I mean, some others have been with them 20, 30 years. So I can't compete with that. It's even longer. But yeah, I have somewhere between 15 and 20 years with him.
Oh, wow. And currently you do hold not only the rank, of course, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, which is an amazing accomplishment in itself, but you also hold a position within the organization.
Yes, yeah. So I when I had my gym, I was obviously a affiliate gym, and I still am, even though I don't have a standalone gym anymore. But I'm a mentor coach. So I'm very, very honored and fortunate to work with CSW and Sensei Paulson and be able to represent him. So it's myself and my fellow coach Jesse Briggs. Both of us have been selected to represent CSW and everything that encompasses CSW. Some people don't realize that it's not just CSW grappling. It's CSW as the umbrella, which is a grappling no-gi system. But in addition to that, there's CSBJJ, there's STX kickboxing, and then it's looking at all of that. There's fitness aspects to it, so it's really, really large. And be able to represent that on behalf of Sensei Paulson. So if Sensei Paulson is not available, or there's new affiliates coming on board, or there's anything with school development, or questions on curriculum or any of that, I can help assist with. I can come out to your school. I can do conferences for you. I can give rank. So it's really an amazing opportunity I was given, and very excited to continue doing that. Really, I think it's really going to kick off next year. I've already been doing it over the past year, but I think it's going to get a lot of momentum in the coming months.
Now, dude, you're so busy because you also have your martial intelligence method. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
That is correct. Yeah. That's my own system. So it's many years of putting things together. Again, kind of with that that focus on why aren't people teaching self-defense. And not to say all self-defense is bad, those who do teach it. There's some great stuff out there, but it's very easy to go on YouTube and you'll find, 21 out of 20 things are terrible, and make no sense, right? They're in scenarios that are completely unrealistic. They're with people who don't need the self-defense training. Everyone needs it, but it's some 6'6", 250-pound guy telling you how to do whatever. And this really should be for someone who's unathletic, someone who's never done martial arts before. Your mom, your dad, any kids, right? For me, that's the focus. So with that mindset, I created the martial intelligence method. And one, it's a platform for learning, and the way I've structured it, but it's also focused on kind of my three pillars: striking, weapons, and grappling. And there's a fitness element in that as well, but striking, weapons, and grappling are the focus. And it's really meant for non-martial artists, but I teach it in a manner that allows you, it's scalable, sustainable, that anyone can jump into it, even seasoned martial artists, which I've had, and I've tested it a lot over the past 2 years, especially the past year. I've been at a lot of conferences and camps and seminars for arts outside of the ones that I do, and I've been brought in to teach, and I've gotten really, really good feedback from people of all different levels. So far it's progressing well, and I'm really enjoying exposing it to everyone.
So is it a mix of standing and grappling, or?
Yeah, so it's basically striking, weapons, and grappling. So everything starts off with footwork, situational awareness. There's a multitude of things to focus in on there. But the striking is focused on the mechanics of striking first, and then it expands into the simplest striking things that you need to do in a self-defense situation. So kind of your long-range strikes could be open hand, most likely, elbows, knees, some long-range low-line kicks. And then that progresses into more and more advanced striking elements as you progress through the striking system. Grappling, standing and on the ground. The focus is not to go to the ground, despite popular belief. I don't want to be on the ground. No one else.
Not in a street fight situation.
Yeah, not in a street fight. But that's my opinion. And I've gotten into many arguments with people.
Well, my opinion is that a street fight is chaotic by nature.
Yep.
And you don't know who's around you. You don't know who's coming up behind you. You don't know where his friend was, where his girlfriend is. There's so many things to contend with.
Yep.
I really need to keep my head on a swivel.
Exactly. Yeah. There's the inside the gym, inside the dojo, with your pajamas on, with gentlemen's rules, on squishy mats, 1v1, where if I don't like something, I can submit or tap out. No weapons involved, no striking involved. All those things are the opposite of what you should be training for self-defense. And that's not saying that grappling or jiu-jitsu doesn't provide you some great benefits. It absolutely does. Health benefits, mental clarity, recovery from
technically just understanding how people's body move. And in a situation, if I put my hand here, the general reaction someone's going to have is this. Just understanding that and be able to predict it and just be able to move human body weight. It's such an advantage.
It is. It's unbelievable. But again, I always say, when I teach, because people will come to me and ask, what's the best martial art? What should I train in? How should I do it? Who should I go to? And I go, well, what are you trying to do? What's your intent? I'm really big on intent. Whether I'm teaching martial arts or doing consulting for businesses or client experience, it's what is your intent? What are you trying to do? And if your intent is to go sweat and have fun and learn and socialize, great. Go do Thai boxing, go do BJJ, go do,
Taekwondo,
anything. But if your intent is to truly defend yourself, are you taking the most logical path to learn as much as you can, focused around scenarios that you could most likely encounter? And 99% of the time, it's not. There's like grenade defense. Okay, why are you teaching a 40-year-old house mom grenade defense, right?
I would like to learn grenade defense. This is an option. No one's presented me this option. This is great.
Yeah, it's run or just wave goodbye, make your phone call, and then
right.
That's it. That's grenade defense, right? But you have things that are so ridiculous, like knife to the throat, or someone's coming at you with a machete. Should you learn all those things? Yeah, sure. It's part of your learning endeavor. But are you likely to encounter someone with a grenade in the U.S.? No. So there's plenty of other things you should probably be focusing on first. Like, can you run 100 yards? Or I should say, because I stopped using the word run. Can you make your way from point A to point B, saying 100 yards without stopping as quickly as possible, right? Generally it's running. Number two, do you know basic CPR, first aid? Not that you need to be certified in it, but do you know it? And do you know how to swim? That's my first three criteria before you do anything else. If you say no to any of them, you need to go figure out how to go do them. And they're all free. They cost nothing, right? But that's before you even do a membership. That's before you learn how to kick or punch or grenade defense or whatever the hell you're doing, right? You need to know how to do that. You're more likely to encounter someone having a heart attack, someone falling down, breaking something, someone getting some bad laceration or getting in a car accident, someone falling in a pool, or you not being able to swim. Those things are way more valuable for self-preservation than any punch or kick or knife thrust or firearm disarm that you could ever come up with.
That sounds a lot like something we've both trained in. Going back to Bruce Lee, it sounds like JKD, Jeet Kune Do.
Yes.
Is there an influence in what you're teaching from JKD, or is it equally? You've trained in so many things. Is it just equal parts of a lot of things you've trained in?
It is equal parts, but I'd say JKD I have trained in for many years, and the philosophy behind it guides my training and my teaching. It really does. I have yet to find a better way to structure things than utilizing the JKD philosophy. And it's really that. There are techniques that comprise JKD, but they're expressions to illustrate how to deal with self-defense scenarios using that philosophy and that methodology. And that's what I've done. It's my own expression of JKD.
What are some of the things you've trained in that we haven't mentioned?
So grappling, obviously, there's CSW, BJJ, as we've talked about. I've done a little bit of Sambo training with Coach Steve in Sambo Steve in New York, Luta Livre with Leozada Nogueira whenever he's in the U.S. Luta Livre is another grappling art. It's basically Brazilian catch, similar to how Shudo is Japanese catch.
Let's talk about that for a second, because
sure.
the Luta Livre guys and the BJJ guys have historically, that's a big rivalry.
Yes.
Now we're fortunate enough to the time we live in. A lot of that is, I don't know if it's washed under the table, but people are open to cross training now, where 25 years ago, you did BJJ or you did Taekwondo or that's it. Whatever was the closest gym to your house, that's what you did for the rest of your life. You're stuck, right? Unless you were like me and I was sneaky. I would do 2 days a week over here, 2 days a week over there, 1 day a week over here, and then just keep it to myself. Yep. But so it's a fascinating and awesome time to be a martial artist. What was it like studying Luta Livre? What did you take from that experience? And explain it for the listeners.
Sure. This is controversial for some people. I pursued it because one, I was fascinated by it and its origins. But number two, it's a catch wrestling derived art, and the same way Jiu-Jitsu is, which will piss people off. They're going to go, "Oh no, what do you mean? It was created by the Gracies." That's false. What I love about it is that it has a huge. If it wasn't for catch wrestling, there would be no such thing as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So essentially, if you start to look at those who traveled around the country, particularly from the Judokan the Kodokan doing judo, it was judo jiu-jitsu at the time in the 1800s, in the early 1900s. There was a huge migration of Japanese into South America, particularly Brazil. And that's what brought Maeda to tour. He was touring the world at the time. And to make extra money, he would go on these carnival circuits and wrestle, right? And at the time,
it was very common for wrestlers to do all over the world. European wrestlers, the catch guys. It was a carnival circuit, U.S. carnival circuit,
all over the world. Mm-hmm. And that's what brought him to Brazil, amongst other things. And he would use his judo. And at the time, judo was far more diverse than what it is now. It was essentially, if you want to go, there's pre-war judo and post-war judo. World War II. for the most part.
We keep
Very,
taking we keep taking things out of judo,
yes.
namely leg attacks recently have been removed from judo, which is a
Yep.
huge mistake in my opinion. But
I agree, and they've adapted it similar to freestyle and folk style wrestling to make it more and more entertaining and faster and more dynamic.
for
But
television, for viewers at home, yeah.
yeah, to do that, for it to be a spectator sport, you need to make it exciting. And for many people, the Nawaza, the ground, was not very exciting. So we fast forward, judo jiu-jitsu still had self-defense elements into it. But for a lot of these people from the Kodokan to make money, they couldn't just do judo. No one wore the kimono. So they had to take it off, and they had to adapt some of their jiu-jitsu slash judo at the time to other styles of wrestling and compete all over the world. And the premise of that was that they had to expose people to judo, but it was never really fully judo because they had to take it off. And through that, you saw the migration of martial arts into Brazil, and really a split with the Gracies kind of developing their own system, which was 100% Japanese jiu-jitsu and judo, focused on the waza. And then you saw basically the big split was the Gracies have a Scottish background, and they were well connected in the government. They owned a lot of land at the time, and they had the ability to acquire or make a lot of the kimonos.
They were rich. That's what he's trying to say, everyone.
Yes. So they had, and there's even debates about that, but basically they had access for one way or another to the kimonos, to the mats, to these things that were inherently very hard to get outside of Japan. And that attracted others exactly like them. Those who were super poor in the favelas, right? Typically those who were darker skinned, couldn't afford kimonos. They couldn't afford belts. They basically trained in swim trunks or their underwear, and had to disseminate what they had learned from those Japanese lineages. But it was much more free, much more open. And luta libre in itself is just it's an open, free style of wrestling. That's what it means, right? So it's an open wrestling or a free wrestling. And it had leg locks in it, right? It was a form of catch. So it's really that amalgamation. It's very, very similar to like Japanese catch wrestling. It's with the Brazilian flair. So to kind of fast forward some of that, I really love it because what it forced, whether jiu-jitsu won in the end or not, what it forced everyone to do was take the kimono off and fight the way of the poor people, right? Which was luta libre. You had to take it off bare chested, and you had to fight it out, and you had to respect the leg locks and the other things. So that's kind of the victory, at least from my perspective in that. And that really was the start of the no-gi game, at least in South America and in Brazil. Obviously, many of those who know the history, those were big rivalries early on, but I loved it because it was a very fast speed, really, really focused on leg locks, a lot of front headlocks, and what people would know as Darce or Bravos or three-quarter chokes. That was a big part of it. So you didn't see a lot of fancy guards. You didn't see any of that. Straight to the point, really good wrestling, really high-paced attacking, which is very similar to what you see in Sambo, very similar to what you see in Japanese catch.
I know you're old school when you use the term Bravo choke. That's the way I learned it. Was called, oh, it's a Bravo choke. And then the word Darce came in. Yep. And that's all anybody ever calls it. But back to Brazil, because this whole lineage and the splitting of it is fascinating to me. There was also, wasn't there Oswaldo Fada, who also taught in the favelas? Do you know anything about that history you could explain?
Yeah, so that's a long history that goes back to, for those who might know, it goes back to like the Novo Niao lineage with Peneiras and a lot of the other guys, even all the way up to like Jose Aldo, Hasamura, all those guys, old school to many of those who are doing jiu-jitsu now. But that had a really mixed background. So it was a mix of the kimono and not the kimono. So a lot of those guys had luta libre black belts as well. So Jose Aldo as a luta libre black belt. Toquinho Pajares started off as a lucha libre fighter. Marco Huas, lucha libre fighter. You look at a lot of these guys either cross-trained in secretly or came from lucha libre background to begin with. And one of the cool things was that not only was it a really diverse grappling art without the kimono, but they also started incorporating striking into that. because it had that Japanese background. So they were incorporating styles of karate in there, and then later on into Thai boxing, because you look at the Dutch and learning basically their Kyokushin and adapting it to beat the Thais. You saw that evolution also happen in Brazil, almost the same exact way. So the guys in the favelas were the first in training that and really mixing things up. And then the byproduct of that is like the Marco Ruas and the Vitor Belfort. You never saw anything like that at that time. They were doing it all, right?
Yeah.
Outside of Japan, you didn't see any of that.
For people that don't remember, young Vitor, I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again. When Vitor came out, it was incredible. He basically did like a Wing Chun straight blast. And I think it was like a UFC Japan or an Ultimate. And just I'm surprised the Wing Chun guys didn't just claim that for themselves. It was the most amazing thing. But so the Lucha Libre influence definitely has been felt in the UFC. What are your thoughts on where jiu-jitsu has come from when it landed in America to now? I mean, I'll ask you this question because now we've kind of moved into an era where we've gotten away, and this just happened recently, from calling Hickson the GOAT. Now we're calling Ryan the GOAT, right?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the evolution of jiu-jitsu?
I struggle with it sometimes because obviously I love seeing the creativity in there. It's probably one of the most creative martial arts, period. So
it's one of the only ones I've seen change at all.
Yeah, drastically change. But you see nuances, like if you look at Thai boxing, you see it evolve and change over time. There's popular things and unpopular things, and many other arts too. But I think jiu-jitsu or submission wrestling or nogi grappling, whatever we want to call it, has evolved incredibly, especially over the past 10 years. One thing that I love the most is that we went from like a really diverse blend of grappling arts that existed in essentially 1800s, early 1900s, to very specific ones, to now it's more of a mix and a blend of everything. And looking at it, and many people may not know this, some people do know this but don't give it credit, is that catch wrestling plays an unbelievable amount has an unbelievable amount of influence in the modern day game. The modern day game, those like, I've always admired Gary Tonin. Those like Gary Tonin, the new American game in particular, that's wrestling based. It's fast paced. It's more focused on top game and pressure passing, kind of like the Daisy Fresh for some people kind of approach, is essentially what Shuto or catch wrestling in Japan look like, and even Lucha Libre at the same time. So it's very, very high paced, very pressure oriented as well, and very much an attacking style. So it's really cool to see that evolve. And in many ways, philosophically, catch wrestling will probably be never be as popular as it is now, because it's gotten so much more exposure than it ever has been, in my opinion, because there's millions of people doing it via jiu-jitsu. The unfortunate part is that it's now part of jiu-jitsu and not its own thing.
It's been assimilated.
Yeah. So that's why I say it's more popular than it's ever been. And some people might argue, well, there were, people filling stadiums to watch catch wrestling back then. Yeah, but you can go to any place in the world now and find a BJJ gym. And part of that are sit outs, double legs, collar ties, 50-50s. That alone are things completely influenced from wrestling and catch wrestling.
Now, everything you just said about catch wrestling's influence on jiu-jitsu, I don't have an answer to this. I want your opinion. How much of that can we attribute in a significant way, not in its entirety, but to Erik Paulson?
This is a good one. I would say there's an overwhelming majority of things that people are doing now that have come either directly or have somehow indirectly to the modern day game. No one else was doing leg locks, and people don't believe me when I say this, but Hickson gives credit to Sensei Paulson, at least he did in one interview. He literally not only gave him the tapes, but taught him leg locks. But also the modern day game, you look at jiu-jitsu 20 years ago, people weren't doing lock flows. That didn't exist, right? Maybe you had a front choke or guillotine to a figure four, a guillotine to kimura, and maybe a triangle mixed in there, maybe. But even previous to that, people weren't chaining these things. And then this influence of catch wrestling to do those things, especially Japanese catch wrestling, you see the sequences, and that's part of Shuto, that's part of CSW, and that whole lineage with Billy Robinson, Carl Gotch, all the way through that into our lineage. That's where that chain wrestling, the submission wrestling, that's where it comes from. And
really kind of championed by Erik Paulson, at least in the United States, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were some others doing that as well, but not to the degree that Sensei Paulson was. Not in a curriculum form, not broadly teaching it and sharing it, and he adapted it specifically for an American audience for MMA.
How so? Explain that to me. How he adapted it.
So one, the Japanese were obviously smaller, and he's multiple time heavyweight Shudo champ in Japan. But knowing that wrestling was so prevalent here in the US, he had to adapt it for that and also adapt it for BJJ. So even though it wasn't as popular as it is now, it still existed. It's only fairly recently, past 20 years, where BJJ has taken off in Japan. So having to adapt all of that and influence all that, and also have a fighting mindset as well, is what Sensei Paulson really started putting together and thinking of it. Hey, can we start chaining these things with a complete fight context for a more of a Western audience and a Western style of learning and teaching, and incorporating that into fighting. And you see that now. I mean, there's tons of fighters in previous and current in CSW, and it has influenced everyone. His stuff, his mark is on the overwhelming majority of videos and DVDs and books and everything else out there. And he's
movies.
Movies, everything. Like the modern day leg lock game is strongly influenced by Sensei Erik Paulson. And I'm not going to mention names, but some very famous instructors who don't like to give credit where credit is due. It's almost verbatim from some of the old DVDs of what Sensei Paulson does. Now, that some people may argue, well, with so much creativity and so many people practicing, people are going to come to the same conclusions. Absolutely, right? When you have such a huge influence of people all working together at the same time, people are going to come to the same or similar conclusions. But the fact is, when you see things taught almost identical, or flows that are almost identical to how Sensei Paulson teaches them and has taught them for 30 years, it's clearly stealing. Like mother's milk and the smother from Mount is new technology, right? The Mikey lock was recently invented. There's videos of that from literally 30 years ago, the same exact lock, the same exact smother that's happening now, even with the same name. Like, that's Sensei Paulson. So it's a little bit of it bugs me, because I had that JKD mindset. CSW is very much JKD. Lots of people don't realize Sensei Paulson is fully certified in everything Guru Dan teaches. So from Kali to Silat to Thai boxing to you name it, he can do it and does do it. So it bugs me when people don't give credit where it's due, because I want to represent, I'm a bibliography of everyone that's taught me. And I try and give credit. If I learn from you, I'm going to say, hey, I learned this from Fury. This is the Fury choker, the Fury locker. This is an adaptation he showed me. And I'm really adamant about doing that, because I don't make things up. It's acquired knowledge, and I want to represent those that have helped me along the way.
Yeah, and I even remember Sensei Paulson at the coaches camp saying that, and he would say, "Oh, Hickson or Hegan showed me this," or then he would name another person, and he even said, "Look, I'm real big on, as he's teaching it, telling people where he got it from." I believe there's a value to that, not just in giving respect where respect's due, but also just getting people used to the history, understanding that there are people that came before them, and that they're representing not just themselves, but not just an academy, but a history behind it and a lineage. So I think there's a lot of value to that. One other thing I would like to ask you about in another area of my interest is your experience in Silat.
Yes. So I absolutely love Sila. I love Southeast Asian arts, and I love the fact that they're well rounded. They do focus on all those same things that I talked about, where it's striking, weapons, and grappling, usually all together. So I've pursued Filipino martial arts for many years, and it's very difficult to find legitimate Silat teachers. And I was very fortunate enough to find Sifu Chris Durbaum in Florida, and train with him. We've had him up dozens of times. I've been down there dozens of times in Florida to learn a Kun Tao Silat form that he's adapted. It's an Indo-Chinese style, meaning that the Hakka people from northern China eventually migrated to the south and eventually into Indonesia and what would be called the Malay countries or archipelago centuries ago, and developed this Kun Tao style. Kun Tao, similar to Jeet Kune Do or Tao Do, it's Kung Fu. It really is a Kung Fu style with a Southeast Asian flair to it. And it has elements of Silat. You see elements of the Hakka people as well in there. And my Sifu adapted it for corrections and law enforcement too. So I know his style. I teach his style. I pay homage to him, but it's also allowed me to explore the other regional styles. What's really cool about Southeast Asia, there's so many different nuances because a lot of them are family systems, and every family does something a little bit different. Same thing with Filipino martial arts. Traditionally, you would keep the art in your family. I would keep the art in my family. We really didn't mix it unless someone got married from tribe to tribe, and then things would get kind of amalgamated. Now you kind of learn lots of stuff from lots of people. But what was really cool, you may be focused on just the stick. I may be focused on the knife. Bob over here might be focused on stick and knife. So it was all different. Someone might be focused on the whip. Now that's all together. What's cool is learning all the little nuances from all these other styles. So I've pursued a lot of other Silat styles since and derivatives of Silat, but I still stay true to my Kun Tao Silat.
What are the derivatives of Silat?
So there's thousands of styles. The most popular, like Penjak Silat. There's Silat Sufian Beladiri, which is Mal Marni system. I've trained a little bit into that. Mande Muda. There's a style called Piper, which is actually a South African martial art, which has a big influence of Silat in it as well. So anything that I can get my hands on and learn, it's not to pursue the belt or the certificate or the instructorship, but just advancing my knowledge and seeing, like I said, the traveling of how the hell did Malay stuff wound up in South Africa, and how did that influence a martial art gang culture there? That's fascinating to me. That's like unbelievable to trace that back and find out, well, these movements come from X, Y, and Z, and this is how it happened. That's the stuff I love.
So, man, at this point, how many years have you been studying the martial arts?
25 plus, probably.
25 plus years, OG in the game. What are the big lessons you've learned?
I think that, and this is not for everyone, this is very personal. Doing martial arts makes me a better person. I'm more calm, more empathetic, more understanding. I've been exposed to a lot of different cultures and people and ways of learning and ways of teaching and ways of understanding and perspectives. So I think that it's almost like traveling without traveling, right? You could travel the world by doing martial arts and really, at this point, never step out of your bedroom with your laptop because it's so accessible. But the fact that you can do that is really amazing. And teaching's not for everyone. It's a skill in itself, to be honest with you. But I'm very passionate about teaching, and teaching is very fulfilling because I know one day I may not be able to, function or train as hard as I am or even was. And giving back to others and seeing them succeed has been a whole series of lessons on its own, for patience and for everything else. It's incredible.
Do you have any advice for someone either looking to get into a martial art or maybe brand new in BJJ or something to that effect? What would be your advice to them?
So one, always focus on what's your intent, right? I'm really big on that. I said that a little bit earlier. What are you trying to do and why, right? That's really big. There's lots of things that you could pursue. And it could be the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of fitness, the pursuit of just being a better person, socialization. That's another thing, getting out, meeting new people, training. Those are all things that you may be pursuing, or all the above. But I'd say if you start with that, that should tell you a lot of where and how you can go. Maybe it's a cultural thing. I've met people that are Brazilian before and they want to do a Brazilian martial art, but they've never done martial arts, right? There's people who are Filipino who never did Filipino martial arts, but as they get older, they get to a certain age, they want their kids doing it. So it really depends on what's your intent and what you're looking to do. And secondarily, I would say find a place that fits you and find a style that fits you. They're all difficult. There's no martial arts that are going to be easy out there. Some are easier than others, but find an instructor, find a location and a place if you can. And now since COVID, there's even more accessible things through Zoom and Skype and Facebook Messenger video, that you need to find someone who that you're, I don't want to say get along with, because that's not the role of an instructor, but someone who's going to be able and willing and able to hear you and work with you to some degree to achieve your goals and achieve your intent. But at the same time, you also have to realize the balance of that instructor isn't a life coach. They're there to teach you. There are some, like what I consider Sensei Paulson, who does more than just teach. Those are one in a few and very rare. But you need to find something that, and a place and a culture that fits you best. And sometimes that's if you want to compete, I'm going to find a competition gym. So go find one, right? There's tons of them now. If you want to roll with older men and women, then there's places to do that too. Finding a place that fits you, just like anything else, finding the right comb or toothbrush or car or boxers or briefs, those are all things personal. Personalization is very much part of martial arts as well.
Where can people connect with you?
So I'm all over social media. You can find me at Alan Chambers. You can find me at martialintelligencemethod.com. Instagram is Philly Kali, Philly Kali, Kali. And Facebook, you can find me on CSW website as well, ericpaulson.com. You'll find me as an affiliate instructor there. If you have any questions, comments, self-defense, anything related to that, martial arts, your business martial arts, any of that, I'm more than happy to chat with people. And that's actually led me to, and I'll do a quick plug for the We Defy Foundation. I volunteer for them. I'm a designer for them. I design their branding and their apparel, and they're a veterans organization that provides full scholarships for combat vets to do BJJ. So all the money that we raise goes right back into the organization to give combat vets full scholarships. So if you're a gym owner or if you're a vet yourself and have seen combat, apply. It's no cost to you. It's fully subsidized by our organization, and it's a lifesaver for a lot of vets to get them moving, to get them back into civilian life. It helps with anxiety and PTSD and TBI and a multitude of other things that are all followed by science and backed by science. So if anyone has questions on that too, you can reach out to wedefyfoundation.org or reach me specifically, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone would have.
Now, I believe with We Defy, the veteran can go on and choose their own academy, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So the great thing is that anyone, if you've seen combat, all the stipulations are on the website, but it's very easy to get in. If you've seen combat, you apply, and then we'll connect you with a gym of your choosing. We usually try and connect people with a gym that's already affiliated with us, and we have hundreds of gyms all over the U.S. that we can connect you with and have you start right away. So we get you, if you're doing no-gi, we'll get you your no-gi kit, rash guard shorts. If you're doing gi, we'll get you the gi, we'll get you patches, we'll get you whatever you need as part of the program. What you have to do, we're different in a lot of ways because it's based on self-accountability. You're required, you get a full scholarship if you get through the organization. If you apply and you're accepted, you have to show up at least twice a week. You have to be there. And you have to be there oftentimes with a lot of other people who are vets as well. Sometimes there's not, but lots of times there are. And the organization, there's a whole ambassador organization. There's mentors within the organization, and they're all there to help each other. And it means a lot to me. The organization means a lot, and I've seen literal people on the brink of suicide come back from that, drug addiction. The stories are unbelievable, and it's one of the places where jiu-jitsu and martial arts specifically can save lives.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate your time. And
Absolutely. Thank you.
If I'm ever in Philly, I'll stop by. If you're ever in Houston, I'll take you to a Stroh's game.
We're enemies now. I don't know if we can do that.
That's right. You offended Mattress Mac.
No, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It means a lot, and happy to help out in any way. I love what you're doing, and I hope it continues. Best of luck to you, and the podcast is awesome. So keep it going.
Same here, man. I feel the same. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, man. Take it easy.
That was a very insightful interview. I want to thank Coach Alan Chambers for being on the show today. Make sure you follow him on his social media. His links are in the description. And make sure you follow your boy Derrick Fury on Twitter to stay up to date with everything pertaining to my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild, art by Ebi Canales. That's right, Ebi Canales is doing the art. And don't forget to watch Lion Killer, my debut feature film. That's right, I made a movie. It's called Lion Killer. It stars Regina Ting-Chen, who's currently on season 4 of Stranger Things. You can watch it at Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Freevee, the Roku channel, or you can pop on over to the YouTube channel called V Movies. And thanks for watching this episode of FURYCAST. And don't forget to like this video, comment down below, subscribe, and yes, smash that bell for notifications. I'll be back next week. Till then, peace.